Well, there is an old saying which is don't waste a crisis, because a crisis is an opportunity to take a step back and think about how you should emerge from a crisis even stronger, even stronger. We in the opposition have been doing just that. We've examined the problems that have been identified and in some cases magnified by the pandemic that Australia continues to go through, and we have based our policy on how we create a better future for Australia as we emerge from this crisis. A stronger economy, an economy that lifts up living standards, an economy that delivers for working people, an economy that's more resilient going forward. Because one of the things that's been identified during this crisis is a reminder that we too often are at the end of supply chains, and that makes us vulnerable to international activity. There's a lot of talk about foreign policy and engagement. The truth is that just about overwhelmingly, most of the rat tests, for example, come from just one country. If that tap's turned off, then that creates a problem. But the truth is we have incredible opportunity. In the resources sector, we have everything, for example, that goes into a battery. Lithium, nickel, copper. We have everything that goes in. And that's why we've established a National Reconstruction Fund. Just as during World War II, Curtin appointed Chifley as the Minister for Reconstruction, and in that post-war period you saw the foundations of the post-war boom in Australia. We want to lay the foundations for the post-COVID boom here in Australia. And we do that by understanding that industries need to transform through the use of cleaner and cheaper energy, but also that we have an opportunity to have new industries emerge. And that's what our Powering the Nation plan's about. Something at the end of this fortnight sitting, people might have noticed in the gallery, is that we announced our climate and energy policy on December 3. We announced it with a fully costed comprehensive plan, a plan that will see our emissions drop by 43% by 2030, a plan that will create 604,000 jobs, $52 billion of private sector investment, $78 billion in total of additional investment, a plan that will see household power bills reduced by $275 between now and 2025. Because the truth is that change happens. Change happens. The job of government is to ensure that you shape that change in the interests of people. And that's why those opposite are just incapable of dealing with the future, because they can't even deal with the present. We saw during the last campaign, the scare campaign about electric vehicles were going to end the weekend. Right. We saw them say that hydrogen was snake oil, that it was nonsense, And that's why when we stand still, every other country in the world with any leadership goes past us. And that is why it's a mistake for us to be frozen in time while the world warms around us, as well as isolated when it comes to action on climate change. So our vision is for new industries powered by cleaner, cheaper energy, for us to identify how we need to make more things here, make our trains and our ferries and our transport infrastructure, make pharmaceuticals, make high-value manufacturing right here. The opportunity is here right now. And we want to make sure that Australians get those jobs. And that's why we'll create Jobs and Skills Australia, to do for labour what Infrastructure Australia does for the allocation of capital and investment, to make sure that we look and plan for what the labour market needs over the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and to make sure that training's there. And we make sure that it's equitable as well by having 475,000 free TAFE places in areas of skills shortage. We make sure that we address areas like nursing shortages by having 20,000 additional university places. And that's the lessons that we've learned. How do we position ourselves to emerge stronger in the future? But we also need to look at social policy. We know that we've had a reminder of how important health is, that if you don't get health outcomes right, then everything else falls apart. And that's why we want Medicare to be strengthened. That's why we will always have Medicare at the centre of our health system, and we'll make sure that we have policies that make sure GPs are more available. It's cheaper to go and see a doctor. That we make sure we support telehealth and we support IT, and the expansion of NBN is about education and health services. It's about positioning ourselves for the future. Those opposite are the copper mob. At a time where the whole world knows you need to go to fibre, they were there saying, no, we don't want fibre, we'll go back to copper, and we're suffering as a result. But we've also seen sectors suffer, childcare in particular. Childcare centres are currently closed, many of them, because they can't get workforce. We need to acknowledge that in order to power the economy, we need to mobilise women's workforce participation. We need to drive productivity. We need to drive opportunity. We need to represent the whole of the country, and that means representing women. That means adopting the Respect at Work report. That means closing the gender pay gap. That means making childcare accessible for all. And of course, most tragically, we've been reminded about the aged care crisis. How in spite of the fact they have a Royal Commission with recommendations about the workforce, they've done nothing about increasing the pay of people in the aged care sector. They still won't guarantee that a nurse should be in every nursing home 24/7. One would have thought a pretty fundamental principle, but the aged care crisis with more than 700 deaths is what we've seen. So we have a plan for the economy, for social policy, for environmental policy around the theme of a better future, making sure that no one's left behind and no one's held back. Those opposite have nothing of substance to say, which is why this week, in spite of the fact that we've seen previously that they don't have anything to say about the problems of today, let alone plans for tomorrow, this week the Prime Minister said, hold my beer. Hold my beer. What I'm going to do is trash our national interest. That is what he said. Now, Mike Burgess, the Director-General of ASIO, said this last night. I'm very clear with everyone that I need to be, that's not helpful for us, about this government's absurd campaign to try and divide the nation. Dennis Richardson has the quadrella. If you think about the 4 positions in this country, in terms of our bureaucracy and our structures that are consistent over a period of time, you think Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Department of Defence, ASIO and the US Ambassador's position. He has held all 4, appointed by the Howard government as the Director-General of ASIO and as our Ambassador to Washington. And this is what he said. The creation or the attempt to create an artificial division only serves the interests of one country, China. So if you're looking for a Manchurian candidate, he sits over there. Because he has served, with the campaign that has happened this week, the interests of China, not our national interests. That is what has occurred. And if you look at the comments from respected commentators like Paul Kelly, Greg Sheridan and others, they all know. And last Friday, of course, I met with the US Secretary of State and our allies. I have been engaged with the United States since I was a guest at the State Department there for 6 weeks, more than 30 years ago. In that time, I've built up friendships with people in the United States and relationships and trust. I've never been to a rally for Donald Trump. And what we're seeing here this week is the importation of Trumpian rhetoric where truth doesn't matter and facts don't matter. But this is what the US Assistant Secretary said about the meeting with us. And we came away reassured these principles we hold dear and our vitally important alliance transcends politics and any one party. And we came away with absolute confidence that whomever the Australian people select as their new leadership, as their next leadership in the upcoming election, the alliance will endure and remain as strong as ever. Well, in order to engage in foreign policy, you need to engage with respect. not engage in the trash talk that those opposite had this week. Yeah.